Are you second guessing yourself? If you are probably normal. In fact, I will venture to say that you are 100% normal, and we're going to talk about it today. So today, it is just you and I, dear listeners. We love when we have guests. I love learning from the guests and all of their insights. I also find it very special when I have the time for just you and I to chat. So today, we are talking about second guessing ourselves, and we're talking about imposter syndrome. Welcome to Happy to See Me, the podcast that puts the spotlight on the overlooked and underestimated. I'm Erika Casupanan, the first Canadian to win Survivor. But before that, I was a Filipino immigrant and corporate perfectionist who felt doubted and overlooked. Now I'm here to prove that every journey, whether messy, beautiful, or unexpected, is worth celebrating. Every Monday, I bring you candid conversations and relatable pep talks with guests who've defied expectations. If you're ready to feel seen, celebrated, and empowered, you're in the right place. And here, I'm always happy to see you. So right now, as I'm recording this, it is the fall, which means we probably had a great summer. Right now in Toronto, it still feels like it's summer weather, and we probably got to relax and have fun. I know I got to slow down a bit and travel, take a bit of time off of podcasting. I, pump the brakes in terms of posting on social media as often. But then now that we are in the fall time, we are back and we are productive and we are moving towards our goals and things are happening and it's amazing. But I do know that in times when you are productive and a lot is happening and you really have to put yourself out there to make things happen, I find that this is when imposter syndrome starts to creep in. Let me know if you also feel that fall productivity imposter syndrome. And the reason I want to talk about this is, yes, there's a couple months left in the year, so we want to finish the year strong. We want to feel good going into 2026. But also, imposter syndrome, I find, is an ongoing thing. I experienced it a lot when I was younger. I still experience it now, but I learned that when you figure out your own tools and your own way of coping with it, you can actually shift how you see imposter syndrome. And I want to talk to you today about all of the ways that I was able to really reframe imposter syndrome in my own mind. And instead of seeing it as this weighty thing that, is bringing me down and is causing me to doubt myself, it's now something that I see as information that I can use as I move forward and grow in my journey. So I would love to get into it. But first, I need to explain what imposter syndrome is. I know that you've probably heard people use this term many times, but I decided to look it up. And the actual definition of imposter syndrome, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, is the persistent inability to believe that one's success is deserved or has been legitimately achieved as the result of one's own effort or skills. Man, that kind of blows to know that you have worked so hard and you have gotten all these achievements that I know in my heart, I know that you deserve them, and to still wonder if they were something you were worthy of. And yes, don't worry, I am someone who has felt this too. And I really think that if we are able to not even befriend imposter syndrome, but make a bit of a handshake with imposter syndrome, we can move beyond these obstacles that we have, and we can create some incredible new outcomes for ourselves. So let me get into how I reframe imposter syndrome for myself. Now, first, I want to tell you a story about the first time I actually worked as a keynote speaker. So listeners to this podcast know that my day job, or one of my day jobs, if you will, is I work as a keynote speaker and I tell inspiring stories that help people who feel like the underdog. And I do them at conferences, corporate events, schools. Love doing it. I travel and I speak in front of hundreds of people all the time. Loved it. But the first time I did it, it didn't feel as smooth as it does now. So before I was on Survivor, I actually worked for 10 years in marketing and corporate communications. And one of the jobs that I had is I actually used to ghostwrite speeches for other people. In particular, I would ghostwrite speeches for senior leaders at tech companies, and they would say these speeches at different conferences or at different events. And I remember I always, number one, loved writing speeches, but I also always felt like I could be the one up there doing this one day. I would write the speeches and I would also be coaching these people on how to deliver the speeches in a way that made them feel confident and comfortable and in a way that would inspire confidence in the audience. And I was always the person who'd write the speech. So they'd be reading my words. And then on the day of the presentation, I would be standing in the background, holding the clipboard and giving the thumbs up, telling them that they delivered it right. And I always thought, okay, maybe one day I could do this, but I don't know when, how, what I'd even talk about, but I really like doing this and I really like public speaking. So, of course, fast forward, I'm on Survivor, I win. And I was so fortunate that I started getting invitations to do keynote speeches at various events. So initially, I was doing a lot of online keynote speeches because it was still pandemic days. A lot of events were still online. So that to me felt the most similar to the world that I was in before, the nonstop Zoom calls, writing speeches. I would deliver the speeches to probably hundreds of people who'd be tuning in on Zoom. But I would be in my own home. I would have my notes up on the screen, refer to the notes at any time. And also, I felt like at the time, I was basically just talking about myself and my story. I just came off of Survivor. Everyone was so interested in the journey to me winning as an underdog that I felt like, okay, I just have to sit in my home, share these stories, and that's going to be good enough. And then I remembered as things started to open up again after the pandemic, someone reached out to me who was a person that was already in my own personal network from before Survivor. And they asked if I would actually speak at their company event, but this time it would be in person. So I would have to travel out of town, actually stay overnight, and I would be speaking in front of hundreds of people. And they wanted me to talk about my journey on Survivor and everything, but they also wanted to make sure that what I said really aligned with the goals and the intent of this full conference employee event that they were doing. And I was like, okay, this is partially something I'm comfortable with, but then partially something that is new and scary for me. I could separately write a speech that focused on company goals, and I could also write a speech that was about me and my experience, but having to marry the two and actually write that speech that was about the company goals and somehow doing that with my experience, that was something I had never done before. And also, I, at this point, had practice in terms of sitting at home and sitting on a Zoom call and having my notes right in front of me and delivering keynotes that way. But this was my first time I actually had to leave town, be away for the time that I had to be away, and then stand there in front of the hundreds of people. And I am like the opening number, the person who sets the tone for the full day. And that is a very important slot for anyone who is familiar with planning events. That is something that if it goes well, the energy, amazing for the day. And if it doesn't go well, then the audience kind of loses trust in the event planners. So I remember I practiced so many times. I remember I watched that documentary Cheer on Netflix, and they talked about how they would go full out a certain number of times before they actually performed. And by going full out, it meant that they would go through their whole cheerleading routine, full energy, as if they were doing the actual performance. So I told myself, okay, I need to go full out a certain number of times. So I practiced this thing so many times that I nearly memorized it. I wore my outfit and my shoes many times, full out going through the speech. And I remember the nerves that came with actually going to this place, delivering the speech, and then the relief that came from the speech going well. And that was definitely a moment when I felt imposter syndrome, because it was like the culmination of me previously being a speechwriter, me winning Survivor, me now being paid the fees that a keynote speaker is paid to go do this thing. And even though I had all these separate things, I still was like, oh my gosh, what if I have all of these qualifications and then I end up totally nosediving? Or what if I have all of these reasons for people to believe that I'm capable of doing this thing, but what I have to say isn't impactful, or the way I deliver it isn't impactful? And I remember feeling all of those nerves, but then knowing that this was something that I really wanted to do. This was something that I had thought about and really dreamed of since before I was on Survivor. So even though I felt all of that resistance, I still pushed through and practiced until I got to that point and got to deliver that speech. And I became that person that I wanted to be the person who could stand up there and deliver this impactful speech, and it goes well, and the event organizers are into it. And I think that what I learned about imposter syndrome at that point was that imposter syndrome doesn't need to feel like these alarm bells that are warning you to stop and stay away and to not move forward because you're going to be in danger. But I learned that imposter syndrome can actually be a signal that you're growing. All of the nerves that I faced at that time, all of the doubts that I faced at that time, they didn't happen because there was imminent danger ahead. They were happening because I was pushing myself out of my comfort zone, and I was pushing myself to be, a new version and to reach a new level of myself and who I am. So now when I do feel those nervous feelings when I'm trying something new, I realize that that's just my body and my mind and my spirit, or whatever you want to call it. That's myself telling myself, you're growing, you're going into uncharted territory. And if you don't let this feeling of resistance stop you, you can end up in another amazing place. And now, of course, when I work on keynote speeches, I still have the nerves, I still want to make sure I'm prepared. I still want to make sure that I am delivering what the client expects. I want to make sure that I'm hitting on all of the notes that they hired me to hit on. So I still feel the nerves in that way. But it's not the same nerves that I felt before, where I was wondering, oh my gosh, am I good enough to be doing this? Do I have something to say beyond just being the girl who won a reality show a few years ago? I still feel those nerves for sure. I think that anybody who speaks in front of people is going to feel those nerves. And I think even if you don't speak in front of people, I think that if your job requires you to push yourself in some way, you're going to feel those nerves. But I do feel a lot more ease when I do the job now. And I'm not nervous in the way I was before, in that I was doubting myself. Now, does this mean that I got too comfortable, that now I'm complacent in the job? I don't think so. And here's why. When I look back to when I would ghostwrite speeches for people, I was comfortable. I knew how to take the information from different sources, what we needed to achieve, and, mix all of that together. And the output would be this keynote speech that I would teach someone how to deliver. I knew how to do that. And I wasn't feeling the same resistance that I felt when I was speaking on my own as a keynote speaker. And because of that, I wasn't really pushing myself and I wasn't really growing. I think that if I had stayed in that role, in that world for much longer, and honestly, I think even on the tail end of me being in that role, I felt complacent. And I think that it would also manifest into being resentful and being jaded, but I definitely felt complacent. And I think that when I focus on keynote speaking now, there is a level of comfort, but I wouldn't say it's necessarily comfortable. I think that where there's comfort is I feel like I'm in flow. So I feel like as I'm preparing for a speech, I feel like when I'm delivering a speech, and even after I deliver a speech, I feel like I am doing what I'm meant to be doing. I know maybe that sounds a bit cheesy, but truly, I feel like I'm doing what I'm meant to be doing. And because of that, I don't think that it's the same being comfortable where I'm not growing, because I think I still am pushing myself all of the time, but I'm feeling that I'm in flow. So I think that all of these feelings and sensations and signals that come with imposter syndrome, it's just a matter of reframing them and then understanding which ones to follow and which ones to resist. So imposter syndrome, not alarm bells, not a warning to stop, but a signal to you that you are growing. And then also being comfortable. There's a difference between being comfortable and complacent and staying in the same spot versus being comfortable because you found your flow and you're going to keep following it and you're going to keep growing anyways. And if you follow that flow and that feeling of flow, that feeling of knowing that you are doing what you're meant to be doing. And hey, even if that feels too deep, maybe we don't know if we're doing what we're meant to be doing. But if you feel like you're enjoying what you're doing, if you feel like you're contributing and you're making an impact, following that feeling is always going to help you to grow. So remember, imposter syndrome, not alarm bells, a signal of growth. Another thing when it comes to imposter syndrome is we need to shift our view of confidence. So I looked up the definition of confidence, and according to the Oxford English Dictionary, confidence is a feeling of self-assurance arising from one's appreciation of one's own abilities or qualities. I like that, right? Confidence is about self-assurance. I like that. I do feel like sometimes when people in general talk about confidence, sometimes it gets misconstrued. I think sometimes people see confidence as someone who is the loudest person in the room, or someone who always takes on the leadership role and they're always in the command position and they are telling people what should be done and they're leading the charge. And that's great. That's great. We need people like that everywhere. There's room for all sorts of people, and we can appreciate those skills that those particular people bring. I think that the challenge is sometimes we believe that that's the only way that confidence exists. And if you do not exhibit every single one of those traits, then you must be somebody who is struggling with their self-confidence. I know that that was something that I had a hard time with. I think especially when I go back and I think of myself in the working world, I would get all sorts of advice. And I'm sure it's advice that you've heard that women in particular are told to really get more respect at work. So I would be told to do things like to show my teeth or to speak in meetings, even if I don't feel like I have something to say, just because the person who is visible and verbal tends to be seen as the one with credibility. And I always had a problem with this because I was like, wait, I just want to listen and take in. And I don't feel like I need to talk for no reason. I feel like I'm understanding what's happening. I would be told to be more bossy, which is so funny to me because who wants to work with someone who is more bossy? I felt like, again, that was telling me to operate in a way that didn't feel really authentic to me. And I would also be told to, quote unquote, work smarter. And I don't know if I believe this is working smarter, but I'd be told to work smarter and to just say yes to whatever the person with the most quote unquote power in the room has to say, even if you don't really agree with it. And even though it compromises you and your contribution and the whole project, just be smart and just say yes and go with whatever they say. Which I also have always had a hard time with too. Because I was like, wait, in which case this is when I want to say something and share my point of view and maybe challenge what's going on. But I feel like I had so many signals that you had to operate in a specific way in order to be seen as confident. And then if you're seen as confident, then that's what sets you up to have respect and then to have success. And I think that as we look at that definition of confidence that I read before, it is not about those things. It is about self-assurance. So now when I think about confidence, I like to think of it as not the certainty that you have what it takes, or the certainty that everything's going to go well, knowing full well that, you're going to get it, you're going to deserve it, and it's going to be amazing, because there's no such thing as that. We don't have control. We don't know what's going to happen, and that's okay. I think actually letting go of control is a good thing. But confidence to me is less about the certainty that you know what you're doing, and it's more about the self-assurance that no matter what gets thrown at you, you're going to be able to handle it. And you know that no matter what the circumstances are, no matter if something goes wrong, you will know how to handle it. Whether it's knowing that you're going to be able to be resourceful and figure it out, whether it's knowing who to ask and the right questions and knowing who you can lean on, or even knowing that if everything goes to shit, you will be okay and you'll keep standing. And on top of that, and I think this is an important one, it's also the self-assurance that if things go well and you get that amazing outcome, then you can own it and you are worthy of it. And you can own that your efforts and what you did led to this win and this amazing outcome. And you don't need to shrink yourself. You can hold it and you can take it. Because I think that that's something that people struggle with too. I think especially with women. And I think also me being Canadian, we have that built-in humility. And I think a lot of cultures have that built-in humility. And it's okay to push ourselves a little bit to be like, yeah, I did that. That was awesome. And I think we can put less pressure on ourselves to exhibit confidence in a specific way. Confidence is going to look different for everybody. Hey, I know that there are people who exhibit quiet confidence, and that's amazing. And that probably scares the shit out of a lot of people. But you can live and embody confidence in your own way. And I think what would be really helpful is to actually reframe confidence. Instead of always feeling good, it's just knowing that you'll be okay no matter what happens. So that's my second piece of advice that helped me a lot when it came to really moving through imposter syndrome. Knowing that confidence doesn't need to feel amazing all the time. It doesn't need to look a certain way, but confidence is about the self-assurance that you can handle whatever is thrown at you. The last thing that has helped me to reframe imposter syndrome is knowing that imposter syndrome is not a one-way conversation. Actually, if it's one way, it's not even a conversation. Imposter syndrome is not like a sign that is in front of you and that is fact, and all of these doubts are all there is to it. Imposter syndrome can actually be a two-way conversation. When you have those feelings coming up, as I called them before, those signals saying, okay, this is hard. What if you're not able to do this? This is challenging. This feels uncomfortable. What's important is to actually be prepared to answer back to imposter syndrome and to have that conversation and to be able to actually tell that voice in your head, no, I've got this. I've got this. And the way that I personally like to do this is by building, the way that I call it is a confidence snowball. So I love the idea of collecting proof in your head that you are capable. Okay, let's say me first starting a podcast. All right, totally new for me. This was very different from what I had done before Survivor or anything. And in order for me to start the podcast, I had to tell myself I had one little shred of something that would make me believe that I could do it. The proof to myself that I had what it took to start a podcast was that I wanted to start a podcast. That's it, okay? So think of that as the first little bit of snow in my confidence snowball. And for anyone who lives in a place where it's snowy, you know that when you first start to make a snowball, it's kind of like crunchy, like awkward. You pick up the snow, you put it in your hands, mash it together. Maybe it'll take if it's packing snow. Maybe it won't because it's not the right kind of snow. But if it does take, it looks more like, this little nub of something rather than a ball. That's all you have to start the snowball. And that's all I had when it came to starting a podcast. And then from there, I was like, okay, what else do I have when it comes to starting a podcast? And I was like, I know that I have reached other goals in the past, whether they were fitness goals, whether it was the goal to be on Survivor and to win, whether it was the career goal. But that was the next thing I could add to my confidence snowball, that I knew I could reach goals. And then when we think about make a snowball, after you have your little nub, then you put it on the ground and then you push it and you start rolling and more snow gets added onto it and it gets a little bigger. Still, it doesn't look quite ball-like, but the little nub has something. And then as I went on in terms of starting a podcast, I was like, okay, what else do I have that I know I have what it takes to start a podcast? And I'm like, okay, I used to be a marketer. I used to work in PR. I know how to name things. I know how to position things. I am capable of writing an episode description and I have ideas for what I want to talk about in the episodes. That's more proof. And then once again, when it comes to the snowball, we are pushing it along the snow. It's getting a little bit bigger. And then, of course, once I start the podcast, that's when I start to collect more proof for myself. So proof. I released episode 1. More proof. I asked people to be on the show and they said yes. And then think of the snowball. We're pushing it. It's getting bigger. Maybe we're rotating it in the ground so it's starting to look more like a bigger snowball. And then, of course, as time goes on, I'm like, okay, I've now released 100 episodes of the podcast. I've won awards. I am part of a podcast network and I'm collecting more and more proof that I'm able to be a podcaster. And then my snowball is now getting bigger and rounder and bigger and rounder. And then now whenever I have doubts, and of course, I'm a person, I always still have doubts, But now whenever I have doubts about something, I can look to that snowball and think, okay, this is proof that I am capable. This is proof all on my own that I am capable. And whenever I have those conversations with imposter syndrome now, the ones that say to me, maybe you don't have what it takes, maybe you're not good enough, maybe you should just give up, I can be like, hey, imposter syndrome, check out that snow boulder I have with all of the proof that I've collected for myself that I am capable of making something happen. And what's so important about this is not only are you collecting all of these receipts for yourself, but you're learning to have your own back. you're learning to be the one to be able to stick up for yourself when you have those moments of self-doubt. And of course, it's always amazing to have people around you who can support you and to be able to build those mutually supportive relationships where if, let's say, the voice of imposter syndrome is getting too big for you and you feel like your snowball isn't up to snuff, you can go to someone who you love and who you trust, and hopefully they'll be able to tell you how capable you are and all of the amazing things that you have accomplished. And it would be great if in their moments of doubt, you can be the same person for them and you can remind them who they are and help them to get back on track. And so with this reframing of imposter syndrome, I mean, for me, it works to know that I have these snowball examples in my head. But you can think about the ways that work for you to really have your own back and to have those receipts and to be able to respond to imposter syndrome and to tell it to, be quiet or even just take a hike. Whether you want to journal, whether you want to write a letter to yourself with all of the amazing things you've done that you're proud of. And these can go beyond career goals or anything or career achievements. These can be things about you and your personality and what you contribute to the world that you really like. Like you love to play instruments and make music, and your proof for yourself could be that you regularly invest time in yourself to do something you love and play guitar. Or it could be that you love cooking or baking or something, and your proof for yourself is you baked some really complicated cake and other people liked it. And I don't really cook, so hopefully that's a reality for someone. If you did that, then I'm very proud of you. But yes, think about the way that you are going to respond to imposter syndrome at that time. And eventually you could reach the point where you don't even need to have the back and forth conversation with imposter syndrome in your head. You could just know. Sometimes I like to think of imposter syndrome as the well-meaning friend, the friend who is saying things out of pure love, who has your back, who wants to see the best for you. But sometimes the advice that they give you doesn't quite sit well with you, It's like the friend who wants to give you relationship advice, but you're like, I feel like this advice is based on you and your experiences and your point of view. And thank you. I love you. I know you're looking out for me, but I know that the advice that you're giving me is not really for me. And that's okay. And I still love you. And I hear you, but I'm not going to follow the advice. Everyone has a friend like that. And we all love our friends. But you could also see imposter syndrome as just like the well-meaning, loving voice in your head that wants you to feel safe and secure, and you just have to know, thank you, and not today. Thank you, but not today. That is my third way I have reframed imposter syndrome for myself, to remember that it is a two-way conversation, and I have all of the proof that I am capable. So that is my little pep talk on imposter syndrome. I hope that everybody can reach their goals in the fall in 2026. And even if you don't reach all of your goals, whether it's in the fall or in 2026 or whatever, I still think it's pretty fucking awesome that you are investing in yourself and you are growing. And I am always cheering you on. I love when we can chat one-on-one, listeners. So if there's anything that you would love to hear me chat about, any pep talks, any insecurities you think that you would love my advice on, which would be so cool, let me know. Send me a DM to the podcast Instagram, write a comment on YouTube. I also feel like I need to say I am not a therapist or anything. We are just buddies. This is the same advice that I would give to one of my friends in real life. Instead, I'm giving it to my friends who tune into the podcast. So thank you so much for tuning in. I will be back with a guest interview next week. And until then, thank you so much for spending a bit of time with me this week, and I will be happy to see you next Monday.
This podcast has been brought to you by the Sonar Network. Sonar!